Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake. I'm an author, robot, and loin streamer, and today I've got 3, maybe 4 different stories for you guys that I would love to get your opinion on. But before we get started, number 1, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number 2, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Lamoy is the monthly event here on the channel where I give you guys a prompt, you give me a story, and then I read them here. We enjoy them together once a month, and it's a great time. Number 2 is the Fresh Meat feature, where if you're an indie author and you've got a book out there that you want to get more traffic to, or attempt to get attempt exposure, because let's face it, we all struggle with the exposure. But if you would like your book featured on this channel, the other way is through the Fresh Meat feature, where if you are an indie author that has a book out there, if you would like to submit your first chapter and your cover, I will read them here on the channel. No opinions from me, and hopefully new readers will find your content. And number 3 is if you'd like to read any of my books and possibly roast the heck out of them, they are linked down in the description below and available at all of your favorite booksellers and also your library upon request. So with all that said, let's jump into the stories. We've got some good, we've got some cancellations, and some merger updating. So with that said, let's jump into the stories. The first has to do with Chuck Tingle. From The Hub, undisputed world's greatest author finally lands Big 5 publishing deal. Yes, it's Tingle time. I've actually, this is about Chuck Tingle, and I've talked about him on the channel once. I think it was mentioning that if he can write love stories that get super popular, absolutely whatever you're working on can probably get popular, probably. So all-time author, I should say Johnny Diamond's all-time favorite literary personality, greatest self-published author of ever, Chuck Tingle, has signed a 2-novel deal with Tor's Nightfire imprint. Per the publisher's marketplace announcement, the first book, Camp Damascus, is about a group of queer friends who begin to realize their memories of surviving a hellish gay conversion therapy camp have been stolen from them, and the second, called Bury Your Gays. As Tingle's premises go, Camp Damascus sounds downright conventional, and you may recall that Tingle famously trolled the reactionary right-wing old guard of sci-fi back in 2016 when he successfully outmaneuvered the so-called Sad Puppies in their attempt to sabotage the Hugo Awards. I'm not sure what any of that means, because as much as I talk about some things, I really don't follow the nitty-gritty of all of the organizations. And I know Hugo is kind of a big thing, but also if there's something that I should be paying attention to, let me know, because I really don't. But the big thing here is that Chuck Tingle is a self-published author. He's got a bunch of books on the market, probably double digits, if not triple digits, but at least double digits of completely ridiculous stuff like 8 Tales of Hot Food and Beverage Love from Chuck Tingle, Helicopter Man Pounds Dinosaur Billionaire Ass, Space Raptor Butt Trilogy. This is what he has made his reputation on, and he has gotten a Big 5 publishing deal. I don't know if it's actually a Big 5 anymore, because I think there have been some mergers, but we'll talk about some of that in a little bit. But the thing is, there's more than one way for somebody to get published traditionally. And one of those ways is by starting out indie and then going traditional. There are also so many niches inside of publishing, especially in indie publishing, that trad publishing doesn't necessarily pick up on specifically, but when they see you're popular, they will grab you up and pluck you and drop you over there. So I just wanted to mention this specific story to give maybe some kind of hope to the indies out there that there are multiple ways to get out there. And I know that it can seem sometimes daunting or it's a lost cause, and maybe for many that it is, because it's a very difficult job to get something sustainable from indie, but it is possible. Because even on top of all that, I wanted to add that since we are reading The Pawn and the Puppet for the Problematic Book Club, it's an indie book, and to just look at how much spread it's gotten with 4,495 ratings, and it only came out in April of this year. And then if you go to Amazon, it's got 2,171 reviews with a 4.5. So it is getting out there very, very well. So there are ways to succeed as an indie publisher or an indie published person. And so that's just a little hope pill that you can you're not doomed if you do choose to go indie. If you work really hard at what it is that you're trying to do, you can go into trad, if that is the goal that you have. Now, from the opposite side of the spectrum, Earlier last week, I saw this making the rounds from a website called American Greatness. My publisher canceled me in favor of an activist who threatened my life. This is by Blaine Pardoe, and I am not a Battletech reader, so I didn't know really who, I just still don't really know who this is, but I still wanted to cover it and get your guys' opinion on it. For those who don't know the author, I am an award-winning, best-selling author in numerous genres. I have been the speaker of the U.S. Navy Academy, the National Archives, and the Smithsonian on subjects that I write about. I started my writing career in science fiction for a series called Battletech. Battletech has been made into a cartoon series, video games, board games, and novels about giant, robotic war machines called Battle Mechs. Catalyst Game Labs is a current license holder of Battletech, which is licensed by Tops and Frantics. After 37 years of writing for the series, I found myself canceled for voicing conservative opinions/beliefs. There we go. After 37 years of writing for the series, I found myself canceled for voicing my conservative beliefs. In January of 2021, 2 people complained to my publisher asking that books I wrote be pulled from publication because they allegedly contained hidden Confederate messages. Catalyst Game Labs responded that my political beliefs didn't matter as long as they were not in their novels. After a lengthy review of the books and my social media accounts, the company found no political messages, hidden or otherwise. They offered one of the protesters an opportunity to publish a short story in hopes of appeasing him. I warned the company that the man was an online stalker who had been harassing me for nearly 2 years. Later, law enforcement would discover that this man was using a false online persona, that of a self-proclaimed lesbian nurse who was adopting 2 children. Catalyst Game Labs ignored my warnings. In March of 2021, my first conservative political thriller, Blue Dawn, was announced with a different publisher, Defiance Press. Outraged, my stalker contacted a fellow writer with the following directed to me. Quote, "I want to fucking shoot him in the fucking crotch for this shit," end quote, and, quote, "I want him to die in a fire," end quote. The police got involved, and after an investigation, a judge put a protective order in place because of multiple threats. In reality, my harasser was a 39-year-old man living with his parents. He had been fired by his previous employer for issuing terroristic threats. He was charged and pleaded guilty. The man was a convicted criminal. I moved on. To coincide with the release of Blue Dawn, I wrote articles for conservative websites such as The American Thinker, PJ Media, Town Hall, American Greatness, and others. I made it clear to Catalyst executives that I would mention my stalker in some of these articles as an example of woke extremism. Catalyst president replied I would do the same thing if I were you. When my last Battletech novel, No Substitute for Victory, was released by Catalyst in February, my stalker and a small handful of people again complained to Catalyst, Tops, and Fanatics. They took numerous statements from my social media out of context to paint me as an insurrectionist, a seditionist, and other outright lies. The smear campaign was led by the men who had threatened my life. I was told that Fanatics asked my publisher to make this go away. My publisher's solution was to inform me that he would no longer publish my work. I asked if he had verified that the protest was not a handful of people using sock accounts to make their cause appear larger, and he told me that he had not checked and that it didn't matter anyway. It also didn't matter that the quote in question had been taken out of context or fabricated. I noted my other Catalyst contract author and artists had voiced radical progressive opinions far more offensive than anything that I had ever posted. My publisher indicated that he would talk to some of them. Conservatives tend not to complain while the left sees offense everywhere. He informed me that my beliefs were alienating half of their customers. I pointed out that those sales and ratings of my latest novel were on par with my previous works. He then told me that sales didn't matter. I offered to write under a pseudonym like several of his other authors. He refused. Then I pointed out the most egregious aspect. You're literally siding with a person that threatened the life of one of the most productive and popular authors. Ignoring that, he had assured me that he would communicate his decision to release me to the fans. He never did. To be clear, my views are not especially radical. They are the same opinions held by tens of millions of other Americans. While I was getting the Gina Carano treatment from Catalyst, I was proud that I didn't cave to these woke warriors. Such corporate knee-jerking to a minority of left-wing whiners does alienate fans, conservatives fans. This is simple censorship. It can happen to any conservative who dares voice his opinion. As a result, many of my fans will no longer see my works in Battletech simply because my publisher feared online backlash. Meanwhile, his extreme left-wing authors can spew their venom without fear of retribution because conservatives don't whine or threaten or complain on Twitter. Conservatives need to speak with their money by supporting conservative publishers or those companies that opt to ignore the politics of their creative staff altogether. Publishers that throw conservatives under the bus out of fear seem to have forgotten their core business. They should focus on producing good content and not let the woke mob decide who works for them. Caving puts the mob in charge of what content you produce. It's a lesson that both the Disney and Fanatics Catalyst would do well to learn. So, a couple of things on this from my perspective. Number one, note that this is by the author himself. There's no receipts on here for anything, so take this as you will from his perspective. I'm not calling him a liar, but I'm just saying that I'm sharing this perspective to get your guys' opinions on. Number two, if you remember my I Hate Politics video from a couple weeks ago that everybody hated, I know that this is specifically, and it's on a political website, but this specifically using so many political words feels like a sales pitch as well, because it's galvanizing a certain political faction to say, come and support me and spend your money on me. And I get what he's doing and I get what he's saying, and it doesn't really make a difference to me because I prefer not to be told and motivated by political factions one way or another. Obviously, I wasn't reading this guy before, and I'm not going to read this guy now because the type of fiction that he writes isn't really my bag. But this is also a symptom of what I was complaining about in the I Hate Politics video, which is if you market with politics and if you make part of your sales pitch politics, then if you have politics that don't mesh with the leadership or whoever the company is trying to court into purchasing things from them, then that becomes a liability and they will remove you. I don't think slurring things back and forth of woke versus conservative in books and marketing and sales is really helpful for anybody. It's just going to cause a divide. It's going to cause a parallel economy where people are like, well, you're going to buy my thing or you're going to fail. And you see it now happening with both sides. And that's really what I was complaining about. Well, one of the things I was complaining about in my video. The other thing is just like this sort of politicization that is happening in the marketplace carries over into the learning spaces or into the communities that are not necessarily about making money. They're the spaces that you send your work to for critique, or the places that you try to send your work to get into a magazine, and it becomes not necessarily about making money and marketing to a specific political audience, but it starts being destructive on the individuals that just want to create. And that includes somebody like this. If Blaine Pardo was just trying to create his fiction. Now, between a lot of the things that I've talked about on this channel, between a lot of the books that I've talked about on this channel, we clearly see some very left-wing style stories being told in the bodies of like Manhunt and The Men and A Jack of Hearts, and all of these stories that are going through mainstream press, and it's fine. But we're not seeing it the other way. And again, I think there's no way to really stop this, because I think that personally, I think the industry is rotten from the core and it's not doing what it was supposed to do in the first place, which is just publishing fiction. So I think we're going to have the destruction of the industry as we know it, and it's going to be formed in another way completely. But I don't think continually using caustic language to attack one or the other, regardless of which side, if you're red or you're blue, that you're on, I don't think that's going to help in the long run. And I think it's just going to cause tensions to rise up more, resentment to rise up more, and actually cause bigger problems in discourse than really need to be there. Oh, my camera busted, so now we're back. Also, if my image was freaking in the middle of that box this entire time, I am so sorry that it was not flush against the wall. But anyway, obviously I'm biased in that way because I personally don't enjoy my fiction being specifically sold to me as a moral or immoral choice, and I don't appreciate being judged for the type of fiction that I have, and I don't necessarily think this is really effective long term. I think this sort of thing is destructive long term, and I think that we've been seeing it for the last, 10, 20 years especially. But I also remember when conservatives generally laughed at the arts and said they were dumb, because I faced that a lot when I was going into arts and being in arts, 10, 15 years ago. So there's just a lot, but this is not good. This is just adding on to the fire that I was talking about last week when we had publishing is hard and what are they currently doing. But really, I think this is just the rot of the industry, and it's gonna fall down. It's gonna have to change. Something is going to have to change And we're going to get into that with the final story of today in just a second, but there is another story about another cancellation today. I know, right? Another cancellation. This one is upset over LGBTQ books. A Michigan town defunds its library in a tax vote. Voters in Jamison Township, a politically conservative community in Ottawa County, rejected renewal Tuesday of the mileage that would support the Patmos Library. That vote guts the library's operating budget in 2023. 84% of the library's $245,000 budget comes from property taxes collected through millage, not mileage, millage, so excuse me for that. I wasn't expecting anything like this, Walton told Bridge, Michigan Tuesday. The library is the center of the community. For individuals to be short-sighted to close that down over opposing LGBTQ is very disappointing. There have been protests over Michigan's public libraries and at school board meetings about books with LGBT themes, but Tuesday may be the first time the community voted in effect to close its library rather than to have it remain open with books some consider indoctrinating children. Voters on Tuesday rejected the mileage renewal by a 25-point margin, 62% to 37%. That is overwhelming vote. On the same day, voters approved millages for road improvement and the fire department. 10 years earlier, a library millage at the slightly lower rate was approved by 37% average points. The difference, according to voters who spoke to Bridge Tuesday, books in the adult and young adult section at the Patmos Library that depict, in some cases, in detail, same-sex relationships. I think this is going to be, in some cases, in detail, is where it really is at. So this is one of the things that we need to talk about. So number one, go and check, if you haven't seen it yet, go and check out my video on this channel for Jack of Hearts. I did the review of that book, the full breakdown, well, as much of a breakdown as I could do in like an hour and a half because the video was getting long. But I did a review for that book and a breakdown of that book because it was a book that was being voted out of a library, in a middle school library. So that book was being handed to 12 and 13-year-olds. And if that is the kind of book that you're looking at with, in some cases, in detail, then I don't see what the problem is, because normal pornography, as far as I know, the last time I was in a library, isn't really allowed in libraries and especially school libraries. So why is a different kind of pornography allowed in there? We're not talking about non-detailed relationships, and I think that's where that's where the big issue especially comes from, is it's not, the books are not being vetted, and then there's being this shield used against them to not remove any of them when some of them do have obscene content that is not appropriate to be put on those shelves so easily accessible. And I think there is a problem in the discourse when you can't put the no detail or the regular stories that have no gross detail, and gross being like large detail, versus those that do go into heavy detail like Jack of Hearts. And I encourage you to go and watch that video just to see how much detail that book goes into, including the excerpts that I read at the end of it, because I don't think that these books are equal if they have little no detail, or extensive detail. And so if you're going to lump them all in there together, and the thing becomes, well, would you like to have stories in there that are across the spectrum, but they may have pornography in them, or none at all? A lot of parents are going to say none at all because they take their kids to the library and they trust the library to protect their kids. And I think that's something that's being overlooked here. Earlier this year, a parent raised concerns about a graphic novel, Genderqueer, a memoir, located in adult graphic novel section. The book tells the story of the author's coming of age as non-binary and includes illustrations of sex acts. Like, I don't see what the problem is with saying, hey, can we not have graphic sex, especially drawn graphic sex, on the page available at the library? I don't know if it's typically been allowed in any other format, but I don't see what the problem is here, and I think that what you're starting to experience is the backlash of pushing too much heavy sexuality in a situation where people don't want it. And it could have been anywhere on the spectrum. It could have been straight sex, it could have been anything. But I think what you're facing now is there's just too much overt sexuality that it's becoming the swing back. You know what they say about you swing one way really hard and then you swing back the other way really hard? I think that's what you're seeing here. Complaints were filed about several other books, including Spinning, a graphic novel about a girl and her attraction to other girls, and Kiss Number 8, a graphic novel with similar themes. Those books remain on the shelves of young adult, high school age graphic novel section. A group called Jamestown Conservatives passed out flyers at the town's Memorial Day parade that referenced Genderqueer, a memoir, a Pride Month display at the library, and a director who, in in group's words, promoted the LGBTIQ ideology. So I think, again, if it has graphic depictions, illustrations of sex acts, and then it's on your main like poster of this is what we're promoting, I think that you're going to get more backlash than if it doesn't have graphic sexual content. Because like, imagine when you walk into the library and they've got those pedestals where they have the featured books. Those are what you're specifically encouraging more people to look at. And something that is encouraging kids to pick up graphic sexual act books is going to cause a bigger problem than books that don't have those. So my question is, why are these groups specifically highlighting books that have heavy sexual content, and why is it a problem to not ask for it? So this is completely separate from this other situation here. I'm totally gonna get somebody pissed off at me because I'm just trying to present like a couple different ways to do this. And it's mostly just asking for less sexual content. But I also realize that that is an issue that pisses people off as well, because I think in the last couple of weeks, I've seen a couple different Twitter threads that have just been about people that want to write graphic sex in their books. And that's fine. You can write whatever you want, but when I don't necessarily think that graphic sex needs to be put front line and center in your library or your school library, and that it makes sense that people might be like, hey, can you not? Because I leave my kid there to go and pick books, and I don't necessarily want to find out that my kid got a sex ed class from a YA book. But the other thing is, some people just don't enjoy sex, and it's fine if you enjoy reading about sex, but I've also seen just this vitriol and this aggression towards people just saying that they're not into that. Like, sometimes it's just people saying, hey, I would rather have some fade to black. I would rather just not read this heavy sexual situation. And the comments are like, adults do it, teens do it. You're a prude if you don't do it, if you don't want it. And sometimes even just like, oh, I don't write these scenes, but somebody asking or saying please don't makes me just want to learn how to do it so I can shove it in my books. And I'm just like, why is there just this response? Because I don't necessarily understand. I don't necessarily see people that don't put graphic sex in their books saying the same thing when they see people who say, I'm going to shove graphic sex in my book, or say, I wish there was more graphic sex in this book. I don't see people going, well, I'm going to go the other way and just make it even less sexual. I'm not even going to put any romance in this book. So why is there just like this, what feels like resentment in the conversation? Instead of just writing what it is that you want to write, why is there this, I'm going to get back at somebody who enjoys something different than I do? And it's even more weird when I consider the idea that some of this is in sex positive books or sex positive communities, but it seems like some of the conversation is around dissing on people who may be asexual or who may not have that same sexual interest as the people who want to put it in there. But there's an anger one way sometimes, it feels like, in the conversation. So my question is it okay for there to be books that are not heavily sexualized? And is it okay for a general population to say, hey, we're voting on our public libraries and we would just prefer that we do not have heavily sexualized content in our public libraries, because that community, it's for that Michigan library in that county. And that community almost voted almost 70-30 to have them removed. So can't that county decide what they would like to have in their library done with their money? And then, other places that want to have that extreme sexual content can have it over there. It seems like it's only the tolerance is only going one way, and then you're being backhanded if you don't accept it another way. So, I'm sure I've already said some stuff that's going to piss people off here, but let me know your thoughts on this situation. Obviously, this issue and this specific article are highly wrapped in political words, and you've got, the conservative side talking about grooming and indoctrination, and then you've got the left side going in on the conservatives with the homophobia and the transphobia. So let me know what your thoughts are on this subject, and we will get to the final thing, which has nothing to do with cancellations necessarily, but I guess there is sort of the cancellation of a merger at the moment. At a time of mega mergers and flashy high-tech corporate hookups, the biggest U.S. book publishers plan to buy the fourth largest for a mere $2.2 billion may seem somewhat quaint, but the deal represents such a key test for Biden administration's antitrust policy that the Justice Department is calling an out-of-the-ordinary witness to the stand. Author extraordinary Stephen King. In Penguin Random House's proposed acquisition of rival Simon & Schuster, which I think I even talked about months ago on this channel, because I think I have a thumbnail of me like shoving the two together, which would reduce the big 5 U.S. publishers to 4, the administration is burnishing its antitrust medal and its fight against corporate concentration. The Justice Department has sued to block the merger. The trial opens Monday on federal court. That was Monday from July 30th, so by the time this posts, it should already be going on. The government contends the merger would hurt authors and ultimately readers. If German media tightened, Bertelsmann is allowed to buy Simon & Schuster from U.S. media and entertainment company Parliament Global. It says the deal would thwart competition and give Penguin Random House gigantic influence over which books are published in the U.S., likely reducing how much authors are paid and giving consumers fewer books to choose from. An appearance at some point by King, whose works are published by Simon & Schuster, will be highly unusual for an antitrust trial and will draw wide attention. The publishers are fighting the lawsuit. They counter that the merger would strengthen competition among publishers to find and sell the hottest books, and it would benefit readers, booksellers, and authors, they say. A look at the case. Of course the publishers would say that because they want to make one larger company, but and I'm going to have this other article just in case we don't get there. Stephen King says that writers hurt by book publishing mergers, and we'll get to that in a second. But I tend to side with Stephen King on this one, not just because he's so experienced in this and is on the inside, but we'll get into that in a little bit, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So, publishing heavyweights. The two New York-based publishers each have impressive stables of blockbuster authors who have sold multi-millions of copies and have scored multi-million-dollar deals. Within Penguin Random House's constellation are Barack and Michelle Obama, whose packaged deal for their memoir totals an estimated $65 million. Bill Clinton, he received $15 million for his memoir. Toni Morrison, John Grisham, and Dan Brown. Simon & Schuster counts Hillary Clinton, who received $8 million of hers, Bob Woodward, and Walton Isaacson. Are there some nonfiction or some fictions in here? And King, his post-apocalyptic novel The Stand, published in 1978, swirled around a deadly pandemic of weaponized influenza. Bruce Springsteen split the difference. His Renegades, Born in the USA with Barack Obama, was published by Penguin Random House, his memoir by Simon Schuster. Throwing the books at them. The Justice Department contends in the suit that as things now stand, number 1, Penguin Random House, and number 4, Simon & Schuster, compete fiercely to acquire the rights to publish the anticipated hottest-selling books. As they are allowed to merge, if they are allowed to merge, the combined company would control nearly 50% of the market for those books. It says hurting competition by reducing advances paid to authors and diminishing output, creativity, and diversity. The big 5, the other 3 are Hachette, HarperCollins, and Macmillan, which I know Macmillan does a lot of textbooks, dominate U.S. publishing. They make up 90% of the market for anticipated top-selling of books, the government court's filing says. The proposed merger would further increase consolidation in this concentrated industry, making the biggest player even bigger and likely increase the coordination in the industry with a history of coordination among the major publishers. The Justice Department case reaches beyond the traditional antitrust concern of concentration, raising prices for consumers, pointing to the impact on consumer choices and viewing authors as workers as well as sellers of products in the global marketplace of ideas. The notion is that fewer buyers, that is publishers, competing over the same talent pool reduces sellers, authors, bargaining powers. The case potentially creates a precedent that could be used in the labor area, says Rebecca Allensworth, an antitrust expert who is law professor of the Vanderbilt University. And that is, I think that's one of the things that Stephen King is going to also highlight later, is that if there are fewer publishers, then they're going to key in on fewer authors, and there's going to be more competition, and because there's also less opportunity for authors to be picked, then you're going to have less opportunity to be paid. You're going to get smaller advances. You're possibly going to get smaller benefits because it's you that's seeking for the thing. And I also think that mergers like this are going to help aid the collapse of the traditional publishing industry, because not only with the pickiness of the publishers, but the lack of opportunity and the lack of choice. We already see big publishers holding on to names that were made like 30 years ago, and less new talent is being brought in and fostered in the same way that it's like, here's another James Patterson book, here's another Stephen King book, here's another book by another name that you already know, another Dresden Files. Like they're keeping the big names at the top like a product, and I don't know that books are being produced in the same way or being published in the same way where there's as much variety as there used to be. And maybe that's a blind spot for me. I will take that as you do, but let me know. The Biden administration is stalking out new ground on business concentrations and competition, and the government's case against the publishers' merger can be viewed as an important step. President Biden has made competition a pillar of his economic policy, denouncing what he calls outsized market power of an array of industries and stressing the importance of robust competition to the economy, workers, consumers, and small businesses. He has called on federal regulations, notably the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission, to give greater scrutiny to big business combinations. Biden issued an executive order a year ago targeting what he labeled anti-competitive practices in tech, healthcare, agriculture, and in numerous other parts of the economy, laying down 72 actions and recommendations for federal agencies. Targets range from hearing aid prices to airline baggage fees. Publishers making their case. Hold On, Penguin, Random House, and Simon Schuster say as they prepare to enter the trial. The merger would actually strengthen competition among publishers to find and sell the hottest books by enabling the combined company to offer greater compensation to authors. It would benefit readers, booksellers, and authors, the publisher says, by creating a more efficient company that would bring lower prices for books. The government has failed to show harm to consumers as readers because the merger wouldn't push up prices, the company contends. The U.S. publishing industry is robust and highly competitive. More readers are reading books than ever before, and the number grows every year. Publishers compete vigorously to reach those readers, and the only way they can compete effectively is to find, acquire, and publish the books readers most want to read. The merger at issue in this case will encourage even more competition and growth in the U.S. publishing industry. I have to ask about that specifically because I thought that sales of books have been down in the last couple of quarters, and also from what I've heard from literary agents, and feel free to give me any of your specific experiences or what you've heard from agents before, but I've often heard that agents are overworked and pressured a lot, which is also one of the reasons not only do they get a bunch of manuscripts in their inboxes, but they're pressured a lot to find a book in order to submit it. And a lot of agents actually have two jobs. They do their agent thing and then they have some other job because they're not even typically paid very well unless you're one of the top agents. Now, I don't know if that's true because I am not an agent, but that is some of the grumbling that I have seen on Twitter, like among agents' conversations and in conversations at conventions. So let me know what your thoughts are on that, because I'm not claiming that is completely accurate or a perfect picture of what is going on, and that's why I invite that coming in. But something tells me that the publishers that want to make the deal, that are saying everything is fair and this will just make it more competitive in a good way, something tells me that that is not necessarily accurate. The companies reject the government's central focus on the market for anticipated best-selling books, defined as those acquired for advances to authors of at least $250,000. They represent only a tiny sliver, about 2% of all books published by commercial companies, according to the company filing. And then finally, to end on this, is with Stephen King, who will appear, or did appear, depending on how this all goes, in court. In trial that began on Monday, the U.S. Oh yeah, because this was last Tuesday when this video goes up. In a trial that began on Monday, the U.S. Justice Department is trying to convince the federal judge to block a $2.2 billion merger of two of the big five book publishers. It has argued the deal would lead to lower advances for authors who earned $250,000 or more, rather than more traditional argument that consumers would pay more for books. King, author of The Shining and Carrie and other blockbusters, took issue with a pledge that the companies have made to allow Simon & Schuster imprints, basically different brands of books, to continue the bid against Penguin Random House independently for books. You might as well say you're going to have a husband and a wife bidding against each other for the same house. It's kind of ridiculous. Looking for an accountant in the blood-curdling author of Misery, King's appearance in the merger trial shifted the conversation from dry discussion of the economics of the publishers competing for books in auctions to a celebrity author telling how a publisher executive once laughed at him when he asked for $2 million advances for 2 books. King modestly said that he wasn't sure how many bestsellers he had written, but acknowledged that it was more than 60. The defense, led by lawyer Daniel Petrocelli, who defeated the Trump administration's 2018 bid to stop AT&T Inc. from buying Time Warner, had no questions for King. The publishers have rejected the idea that the largest booksellers will be able to reduce advances. The trial is expected to last 2 or 3 weeks. Coming witnesses include testimony from chief executives of the 2 publishers. So that's where that is at. And if it is 2 people in the same company, yeah, I don't see why you would be arguing over who is going to pay more. So it is actually, I can understand why it would actually shrink possible advances, because you're actually taking away opportunities from where an author can be published. But again, I think as you also have the issue of it's going to be one company, which means one culture. And instead, so normally you look at all of these small presses and they all do something different and they look for something different and they're run by different people with different visions. Once you bring it all into one corporate thing, well, I mean, number one, you're getting a monopoly of one company owning 50% of the market share for traditionally published books. So then they're going to be pushing out a product that basically fits whatever is the style of Penguin Random House. And so you're going to have less variety in what they're publishing because it's going to need to fit the company culture. I've also talked about this on the channel before, but in a lot of book deals now, in a lot of contracts, there's such a thing as a morality clause, which is just put in there to say that if you act in any certain way that they deem they don't like, they can cut your book deal, period, point blank. And you can have one person on Twitter that just doesn't like you and they can go, well, that's a violation of your morality clause. Over. It's over. And so as Penguin Random House sucks up more places, the company culture, or the culture at a bunch of different publishers at 50% of the traditional marketing share, is going to be the same. They're going to be looking to publish certain things that fit that brand. And big publishers are already not being as experimental because they're afraid of the backlash. It's the same thing that happens when I'm looking at The Men by Sandra Newman, which I did on this channel, or The Hunt by Gretchen Felkner Martin, which I did on this channel, or The Pawn and the Puppet, which I'll talk about at some point later, where there are things worth talking about in that book, but instead of actually talking about those things, they get focused on with the cancellation side of things, and people's lives actually get ruined. And I'm not saying anybody's or reputations. People's reputations actually get ruined. And I'm not saying that you can't discuss these things or there aren't terrible people involved in some of these things or people that made bad decisions, like attacking people for leaving you a 4.5 star rating out of 5. But that's a separate issue. When you have fewer options for publishers, I'm starting to go completely off topic here, but so when you have fewer options for publishers, then you have one more homogenous company culture, which means they're going to be looking for a more specific product that fits that company culture. They're going to be looking more specifically for sales. And so authors that maybe play to a different drum are going to have fewer opportunities. And I think that as you merge and merge and merge, if this is going to happen, if this does happen, it's just going to create more homogenous books, as we're already seeing. And it's going to just help rot the inside of the traditional publishing apparatus and make more room for independent publishing, whether it's in the form of self-publishing or small presses. But we're coming to a head on just the homogeneity of these situations where it's just building in viciousness and resentment and conformity, I think, in a couple of different ways. And it hurts everybody. It hurts all of the diverse stories that don't fit the brand. And I've seen those complaints as well. Now that I've ranted, now that I've probably ticked off all sorts of people, I should probably try to do a less opinion in general, but I don't want to just read the articles, and so then I just start doing this. Anyway, as usual, all of the articles that I referenced in this video will be linked down the description below if you would like to check them out in their fullness or reference them yourself. And I feel like as I get, the more that I do these opinion videos on just the news or my thoughts on whatever, I'm just constantly thinking, Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? I feel like that's just the internal monologue I'm getting, and I am sorry if it is getting annoying. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below on this topic with the mergers, with what you think might happen if Penguin Random House picks up about 50% of the whole traditional publishing industry. What do you think about the books that are being pulled out of the libraries? What do you think about canceling authors regardless of their political status or whatever, or just the white pill that was Chuck Tingle getting a book deal? And regardless of whether you like what he does or not, it is still somebody moving from independent publishing to trad publishing and showing just yet another way in which you can succeed if that is the path that you want to go. So those are all of the stories that I have for you today. Thank you for watching. Looking forward to your comments. Hope that I didn't make anybody too uncomfortable. And with that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?